Guys, this is day 3 of number lines and line plots. So we started out by looking at number lines and figuring out what each of the hashes meant if they were between whole numbers, so figuring out the fractions for each half. And then the next day we spent time making line plots using fractions, and today we're actually going to start doing some math with these line plots and these fractions. So the problem that you see in front of you right now is one that I used a while ago when we did our line plots with whole numbers. So I'm just going to use this as an example before we move into the fraction examples. So we have a line plot here that is dealing with the length of fishing string in inches, and we have some information, some data up here. So what we're going to do is we're going to use that data and we're going to do some math with it. So the first thing that we can talk about is finding the range. The range is a math word for the difference between the highest and the lowest value in the data. So when we talk about values, values are the numbers that are on your scale, the pieces of information that were recorded when you did your line plot. So our highest value is 15 and our lowest is 10. So in order to find the range or the difference between those two, we're going to subtract. So 15 minus 10 gives us a range of 5 inches. So the difference between the shortest amount of string and the longest amount of string is 5 inches. And you'll notice that's the range along our number scale too. There it is a difference of 5 between the lowest and the highest value on that number line. The other thing that we can do is we can figure out the total amount of fishing string that there was by writing an equation. So coming back up here, I'm going to do all of this up here at the top, writing the equation, because I don't want to have to scroll back and forth. So when I look at this to figure out how many total inches of fishing string were actually measured for this line plot, I would end up having 10 plus, right here I have 11 times 2, plus I have 3 fishing lines that are 13 inches, plus I have 2 that are 14 inches, plus I have 4 that are 15 inches. So if I wanted to know how many total inches of fishing line there were, I would have to solve this entire equation. And I would have to solve this and say, oh, okay, well, that's 10 plus 22 plus 39 plus 28 plus 60. Okay, and then I would have to go through and I would have to solve that to get the grand total. Okay, right now it doesn't matter what the grand total of that is. If you want to pause and solve it for yourself, that's fine, but that's not the point of this lesson. The point of this lesson is writing out the equation and then eventually solving. Okay, but you don't have to do this one because we're going to move into fractions now. Okay, so we have Allie, and she's cutting string pieces for her art project. The line plot shows the lengths of the pieces that Allie cut to use for her project. So we can use all of this information to figure out how many total inches of string Allie has for her art project. So right here down at the bottom, you can see the equation that I would use to figure out the total amounts of string. So let's look at this, okay? And how this equation works. So when I find my lowest value, it's 12 and 1/4, and there are 2 x's there. So we have 12 and 1/4 times 2. Then if we look at our next value, I have 12 and a half, and there are 7 x's there. So 12 and a half times 7. Then our next value is 12 and 3/4, and there are 5 x's. Then we have 13, and there are 5 x's, and 13 and 1/4, and there are 4 x's. So in order to figure out the grand total for how much string Allie has, I would have to do all of this math. Now, this is going to take a while, and it is going to be tough. But if you stick with it, you can do it. We all have these skills now. So I'm just going to do the first part, okay? So just a reminder of how this would be done. If we were going to solve this, we'd have to do everything inside of parentheses first, then add all of those values up. So if I did 12 and 1/4 times 2, I would have to change 12 and 1/4 into an improper fraction. So 4 times 12 is 48, plus 1 is 49/4 times 2 over 1. And oh, this works out great because I can cross cancel. 2 and 4 have a common factor, so I can divide them both by 2. So this ends up being 1, and this ends up being 2. So then 49 times 1, 2 times 1, so 49 halves. So then I would end up with 24.5 for this part right here. And I would keep doing that for each part until I got a number for every part, and then I would add them all up. Now this question would probably take a couple minutes, at least 5 minutes or so. But I just want to show you, here's what the grand total would be. Okay, so when we do all this multiplication and then we add them all together, our grand total would be 293 3/4 inches of string for her project. So Allie's going to be busy for a while because that's a lot of string. Okay, let's look at another example. Okay, so here we have Susanna. She made a line plot, there's Susanna, to show the distances she's hiked in the past 2 weeks. So the question is, how many miles did she hike in all? So when we look over here at our line plot, we're going to notice that sorry guys, we're going to notice that not all of the hashes are marked, so we're going to have to figure out what each of those hashes mean. So between 5 and 6, there are 3 hash marks. Between 6 and 7, there are 3 hash marks. And between 7 and 8, same thing. So knowing that there's 3 hash marks means that it's divided into 4 sections. So then each of those hashes is 1/4. So this right here stands for 5 and 1/4. This one is 5.5, also known as 5 and 2/4. And then we have 5 and 3/4, 6. This would be 6 and 1/4, 6.5, 6 and 3/4, 7. 7 and 1/4, 7.5, 7 and 3/4. Where I have the halves, you could also write those out down as 2/4. Doesn't really matter. Okay, they are equivalent, so whatever works. Okay, so for our equation, and we're just going to look at the equation here. Okay, we're going to look at where there are x's plotted with values. So we have some x's at 5 and 1/4. We have 3 of them. So our equation is going to start with 5 and 1/4. So 5 and 1/4 times 3. Then we're going to have 5.5 times 2. Then we're going to add in 6 and 1/4 times 5. And I'm going to start revealing this here. So 6 and 1/4 times 5. And then our next value is at 7 and 1/4, and there are 2 x's there. Then 7.5 with 1 x, and 7 and 3/4 with 1 x. Now, if we do all of this math, once again, you'd have to take it step by step. These two would be easy because they're times 1. So this would equal 7.5. This would equal 7 and 3/4. Over here, just pick it out. One of these, we'll do 5.5 times 2. So this would be 11 halves times 2 over 1. Cross cancel, 1, 1, common value of 2. So this equals 11. So this one's 11. Okay. If we did 7 and 1/4 times 2, this would be 28, 29 fourths times 2. Cross cancel. We would end up with 29 halves, which would then be, oh, we just did this a minute ago, 4, 8, 1, 14.5. So this would be 14.5. We would still have to solve this, and then add all of our values together in order to get the grand total. If we actually did this math, our grand total would be 87 and 3/4 miles that she hiked in the last 2 weeks. Whew, that's a lot of miles in 2 weeks. Okay, so this next one you guys are going to do. So you're going to need, sorry, I accidentally hit pause there. So this next one you guys are going to do. So you are going to need your whiteboard for this one. Okay, so here we go. This is from yesterday's lesson. It was the data table that we used for the height of the flowers. So we have 2 questions here. We're going to start with the first one. First question is, what is the difference between the shortest and tallest flower height? Remember, you have to look at the values and you're going to find the difference between the shortest and tallest. So I want you to hit pause, use your whiteboard and solve it. When you're done, come back and check your answer. Okay guys, well, our shortest and tallest flower. Well, our tallest flower is, whoops, sorry about that guys. Our tallest flower is 3 inches tall, and our shortest flower is 2 inches tall. So 3 inches minus 2 inches, our range is 1 inch. Okay, so from the smallest to the largest value, we have a difference of 1 inch. Now there's a lot of information in between there because this is broken down into fractions. Okay, so now we're going to go into the more now we're going to go into the little bit of a harder part to this. Okay, so we're going to go to question 2. what is the total height of all the flowers? So we need to look at our data table here, and we need to write out an equation first. We're going to start with 2 inches. Okay, so we have 2 times 4 plus, we have 2 1/4 times 5 plus 2 1/2 times 6, parentheses, plus 2 3/4 times 7 plus 3 times 2. Okay, so there's our equation. Write that down on your whiteboard, and then your job is to start solving it. When you have an answer, come back and check in your work. Okay, guys, here we go. Hopefully you organized your work so that you can follow along. I'm just going to go ahead and solve over here to the left, and I'll write each answer down as I get it. Okay, so the first one's pretty easy. 2 times 4 is 8. Okay, so 8 plus. Now we're going to do 2 1/4 times 5. So I'm going to go over here, 2 1/4. I'm going to change it into improper fraction. So 4 times 2 is 8 plus 1 is 9/4 times 5. So I end up with 45/4, which equals 11 1/4. So this is 11 1/4. Okay. Okay, next one is 2 1/2 times 6. Okay, so 2 1/2 times 6, so 2 1/2 becomes 5/2 times 6/1 equals 30/2. 30 divided by 2 is 15. Sorry, is 15. So this equals the whole number 15. Okay, going to the next value. We have 2 3/4 times 7, so 8 plus 3 is 11/4 times 7/1 equals 77/4. So 137, that's 9, 36, 19 1/4. And then our last value is also whole numbers, so we have 3 times 2, which gives us a grand total of 6. So now we need to add all of these together. So I'm going to add 8 plus 15 plus 6 first. So 8, 15, and 6 to get our whole numbers done. Okay, so 8 plus 5 is 13, plus 6 is 19, so 29. So those three equal 29. Okay, and then I'm going to do our numbers. So we have 11 1/4 and 19 1/4. So I end up with 2/4, which equals a half, and 19 plus 11 is 30, so 30 1/2. Okay, so we have 29 plus 30 1/2, so 29, and 30 1/2 gives us a half for our fraction, and 59. So our grand total is 59 1/2 inches of flowers. Okay, I hope you did really well with that one. If not, hopefully you found your mistake. Sometimes, if you didn't get it right, just really look for your error, and sometimes it just takes a little bit of practice, okay? So that's the end of this lesson. So make sure you put your whiteboard away, and that's it.